Hi, welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 20 of season 4. My name is Lee. I am in Western Australia. This week I'm joined by my faithful compatriots, Vikas, eating a vegan burger in Canberra,
I am a hipster and I will not lie about that.
and we've got Zeev in Melbourne.
G'day. I'm not a hipster.
No.
How the hell are you in Melbourne?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. It's a relevant question,
Yeah.
which we won't answer this show. What we will answer, however, is we're going to talk about the Elijah Doughty case in Kalgoorlie, and we're going to talk about republicanism rearing its ugly little head again. But that's because I'm a filthy monarchist. So let's talk about Elijah Doughty, which is a very, very sad case. So if you're unaware, there was a young boy, I think he's about sort of 12 or 13 or 14.
14.
Yeah, 14, who was killed in Kalgoorlie, which is a remote town in Western Australia. A couple of years ago, and the man who was charged with killing him was found not guilty of manslaughter, but guilty of dangerous driving causing death. Essentially, the case boiled down to the facts of the case were that Elijah Doughty was riding what the driver, I can't remember his name, it's John something. He thought he was riding a stolen bike. He attempted to try and knock Elijah off the bike so he could retrieve the bike, and Elijah hit the ground and was killed. It provoked protests in Kalgoorlie. There was like a riot. They smashed windows at the police station and all this sort of stuff.
Because that's the appropriate response.
Well, yeah, better smashing the cop shop than a lot of other things. But yes, essentially the verdict of the case was rendered this week, and there's been more protests in Kalgoorlie and also in Melbourne and other places. So maybe we could start off talking about, because this is the thing which we were discussing beforehand, and it's obviously very relevant, is he was charged with both manslaughter and dangerous driving causing death. He was found only guilty of the second charge. And we have a lawyer who can helpfully describe what the difference is between these sorts of things, hopefully. So do you want to maybe just talk about those sorts of charges, Zeev, and sort of maybe just help for the layperson understand the difference between the two?
Mostly me.
Okay. Sure. Right. So I think I need to explain three things, really. First of all, what murder is. Second of all, what manslaughter is. And third of all, what dangerous driving causing death is. So the simplest one first, dangerous driving causing death. It's what it is on the label. Did you drive dangerously contrary to the road rules? Or did you cause death in so doing? Those are two basic factual / legal, if it's contrary to the road rules, questions that the jury would have to ask itself in assessing whether this man killed Mr. Elijah Doughty. And they've clearly answered both questions in the yes. The man rode in his car and tried to intimidate him off the road. I'm not entirely sure exactly how, and that caused his death. If I'm not mistaken, basically that's what happened. He crashed the bike.
Reporting says.
Mr. Doughty. Yeah, what all the reporting says is Mr. Doughty then crashed his bike, died. The man stayed at the scene, and that was the result. So that's the simpler one. Okay. Now then we get into questions like manslaughter and murder. So murder is the one that I will explain first, because then you can understand what manslaughter is. Murder is either that someone has deliberately killed someone else with the intent of killing them, or they have killed someone else while intending to do them grievous bodily harm. Basically, a serious assault that results in someone's death. If you've intended to commit that serious assault and it's killed him, you're up for a murder charge, very, very arguably. And the same holds if you were reckless about it. So in this case, there's question marks over whether our driver intended to kill him at all. He says he was just trying to get him to stop because the bike was slowing down. No doubt that's his version of events. He was just chasing after his stolen bike, right? So that's not enough. Then you turn to manslaughter, which is, how would I put it? you're committing an unlawful act which results in someone else's death. Now, what is your unlawful act? Well, it depends. You can be extraordinarily negligent. You can be, in this case, you haven't quite, set out to seriously injure the man, but you've clearly set out on an unlawful course of action, maybe, arguably, to stop this man with your car, which is, very dangerous, isn't it? Is that reasonable or proportionate? Question marks. The point is that you can see why it may have amounted to manslaughter, but you can also see why people would be saying, well, maybe it hasn't amounted to manslaughter at all, because he stayed at the scene afterwards. Maybe the jury was swayed by that, just to pin him on a lesser charge, so to speak. Dangerous driving causing death is a lesser charge than manslaughter in a way.
Well, one carries 15 years max and the other carries 10.
Exactly. And the point is that, you can see why it would be harder to establish that this man, by driving and chasing after the motorbike driver, it's harder to establish that he really intended to do him harm, to kill him. It's a harder thing to prove. We haven't seen the evidence presented before the jury, but just as a general proposition, no other witnesses, just this man driving along in the abstract, chasing after the other guy. It's pretty ambiguous, isn't it? Anyway.
I'll just jump in before. I'm sure Vikas has something to say. So I'm just reading an article in WA Today, which says the Supreme Court heard on Monday the man saw the boy riding one of two motorbikes that had been stolen from his property a day earlier. He gave chase on a wet and uneven dirt track and admitted he was too close when the teenager suddenly turned in front of his ute. The boy tumbled under the car after the impact and died instantly from severe injuries.
My goodness, yes.
Yeah, and so in sentencing the man whose name is, if I can find it in the article.
That was one thing I wanted to get in.
He wasn't named. Okay, there you go. That's why we know
it was suppressed. It was suppressed.
Just that the mitigating factor in the sentencing was that he was remorseful. He entered an early guilty plea. His previous good character and a clean criminal record. So, and the judge said your culpability lies in driving a very large and heavy vehicle at a speed and in terrain that would make it very difficult, if not impossible, to avoid the rider in the event they did something unexpected. So there we go.
Yep. So that's,
there you have it. That's really the go on. Sorry.
No.
That's the gentlest version of events for the accused, I would say. But go on, Vikas.
So I was actually going to say this. So all of the reporting has actually been consistent on this. Is that Elijah Doughty veered into the veered into the four-wheel drive. It wasn't the case that he was trying to push him off. Every version of this offence has indicated that he was chasing after him with the attempt to try and get him to pull over, and he'd recognised it as a stolen bike. Some of the reporting from less scrupulous sites have indicated that the police returned the bike afterwards, so it was actually one of the stolen bikes. But I'm not exactly sure where that went, and I'm not exactly sure on some of those sources. But the other major thing is, I saw one person, so it was one of those criminal lawyer organisations, but they put up a thing saying that he would have, based on what had actually happened. So if you think about it, the guy wasn't intoxicated, right? He was driving below the speed limit, right? So he copped a 3-year dangerous driving on that. So if you think about it, based on what is typically relevant for that, the sentencing typically relevant for that charge, he's on the upper end.
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
Look, I haven't seen that statement of facts that Lee read out there. I've only seen a couple of articles on this, and but if he wasn't speeding, but he was too close to the vehicle, that's certainly what I would call dangerous. Yeah, if you're very, very close to another vehicle and travelling in a car, I'd still call it dangerous.
Yeah. The discussion that was going on was based on other cases where dangerous driving has applied, and they said compared to you know, where it should be, like compared to other things for dangerous driving, they said this is on the upper end for those factors.
Well, it caused someone's death.
Yeah,
I mean,
which is why it's on the upper end.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's up on the upper end. Someone died.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not
yeah.
saying it should have been less, but I am saying
Well,
like it is on the upper
to be
end.
fair,
Absolutely.
He was sentenced to 3 years, of which he served enough.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, well,
and you might say, well, will this man actually ever reoffend? Question mark. Is he really going to go out and kill more people?
Well, the Chief
I mean,
Justice
is he
actually
really someone who
says-
belongs in jail?
Yeah, the Chief Justice actually mentioned that in his comments. He said he doesn't believe he's going to reoffend. So, yeah,
I don't believe he's going to reoffend either.
No. So why is he in jail? You might ask. Fairly.
Well, he should be in jail. He killed somebody. I mean,
no, actually, I'm on the fence about this. So here's the thing, right? Like from my version, the way everything I've read on this indicates that this was a guy who saw a bike that had been stolen from him, and he went chasing after the guy. Sure, maybe he didn't do it the right way, but I don't think that's. I think going after your stolen property in the wrong way is not a crime, right?
I think coming too close to someone else and endangering their life is a little bit of an unreasonable response, and it does deserve some.
It does. Yeah. Which is why I'm saying, like, I don't necessarily, like, I'm sitting there going, like, this is a guy otherwise perfectly spotless record, right? Otherwise, not a criminal, right? Not a danger to society at all, except for this one incident where he saw someone that had stolen his bike. He chased after him. I'm sitting there going, like, okay, fine, that's one really poor decision. Right?
Yeah.
Do I necessarily think that person is a high risk offender as a result of that? Do I necessarily think that person belongs in a jail? It's very hard for me to make the case. Very hard for me to morally justify that position.
Well, I still have a lot of sympathy for what you're saying, because that's why I raised the question. But I also have a lot of, I can see things each way. Maybe that's a lawyer's response, being on both sides of the fence. But I mean, the fact that someone died as a result of this is terrible. There's no doubting it. But
I mean, it depends.
What this man did was, go on, Lee.
I was just going to say,
I don't
really depends on like what the purpose of jail you think jail is for. If you think it's purely to protect others, well then it's probably not fitting, because he's not going to reoffend. But if you believe in jail as punishment, which is, I mean, generally speaking, I do. I mean, you can have a debate about whether that's the best way to have punishment. Maybe there are better forms of justice. I mean, I'm totally open to those sorts of things of arbitration and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, as society as it is today, when you kill somebody, the punishment is you go to prison. Now he's got 3 years. He's going to get parole in February, so he's not going to spend that long in prison. I think a sentence any lower than what he got would actually be unjust. He was directly responsible for the death of a kid, and I think that's a terrible crime, and he should go. Prison is the right.
Hang on.
Right sentence. If the sentence was higher,
right.
I would actually probably be okay with that.
There is one phrase you use there which I object to, and that is where you said he was directly responsible. Right? I
think
think
he died from being run over by a car had the guy not been driving behind him. No, it's directly causal. He drove his car behind this kid. The kid turned his bike. He went under the car. That's causal. If he just let the kid ride off, if there was any other course of action that he'd taken,
would he have got the bike? So here's my thing. My main gripe about this is he would never have seen that bike again, right? If he'd let the kid go, right? And this is the thing. If you look at the statistics in Kalgoorlie, theft is it's massive there, right? Sure. Theft is like all over the shop. It's one of the worst rated places, in terms of it constantly turns up in the West Australian criminal record thing, criminal statistics, right? So I'm sitting there going I'm trying to put myself in a situation where I just saw my stolen bike, right? And I think I would probably do something very similar. I would probably chase that person, maybe not as dangerously, right?
Therefore, you're admitting that the guy caused the kid's death. So he could have taken a different course of action. He could have followed him from a distance. He could have followed him in another way.
From a safe distance.
From a safe distance.
Yeah.
Rather than whatever that might be in the context.
Dangerously, and he caused a death.
Yeah. I don't think the dispute is. So my dispute isn't that he drove dangerously, right? I don't think he caused. You said he was directly responsible for that death.
Yes.
I don't think the moment that the kid veered in front of the vehicle, right? Because he was clearly trying to do something, right? The kid veered in front of a vehicle and he died as a result of that. Yes, it's bad that he couldn't anticipate that a driver in front of him, right, was going to do something. It's bad that he couldn't do that, and he put himself into a situation where he couldn't fix it, right? But that doesn't mean he's responsible for someone's erratic driving, right? And that's a general rule all across the country. You're not responsible when someone drives erratically, right? You are responsible for your own safety.
Yes, but
absolutely right, Vikas.
Sure.
But if you're too close to another car,
yeah,
then you are actually endangering that other
and that's why it's right to charge him with dangerous driving, right? But I was objecting to the term where he said he was directly responsible. I don't think he was directly responsible. I think there were a large number of factors that occurred, right? And I think he was the largest contributing factor to that, but I don't think he was directly responsible.
No, well, I mean, causality is where you do something and then there's a result. And if you can
if you want to go that, if you want to go
maybe we can.
Hang on. Elijah Doughty stole the bike. So if you want to go all the way and talk about causality, the moment he stole that bike was when he signed his own death warrant. If you want to play that game,
gentlemen, maybe we can.
That's why I said causality.
Pause on that note and progress to another point that's important about this case is the broader public protests that surround it and what they mean. Do we have any comments about that?
I think people need to calm down, firstly, right? Even if you believe that 3 years is manifestly unjust, given all the information and you think it's still manifestly unjust, the correct approach is not to, firstly, close up cities. Not the correct response is definitely don't loot your own community, right? And the third is don't freaking destroy actual institutions that are there to protect you in the country, in your city, right? Because that's going to create animosity between the people that are going to inevitably have to shut you down, right? When you're running amok and destroying shit, and basically, it's a bad way to approach community policing, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. I mean, you're always going to have issues in remote areas, just to do with in general with poverty and with problems of welfare and all the rest of it. I mean, you can go to any country town anywhere in remote Australia, and you're going to find that poor people in all of those circumstances are going to have all sorts of disadvantages. And so clearly, they literally had to send in the riot squad, and they threw bricks and bottles and stuff at them earlier in the year. So it's there's some real issues. Sorry, it was late last year. There's some real issues. But I don't think this particular case is tied to them. So, I mean, I guess it is brought in. I mean, indirectly it is because we got a kid who was on a stolen motorbike. That's going to be a cause of issues within the community. But yeah, I think it's not a great way to deal with this. I mean, I don't see anything in this case that makes me think this is a problem. This reflects a racial problem within the country. I mean, I suspect that if it was a white kid on a stolen motorbike, the guy probably would have got a similar sentence. Given the facts of the case, he probably would have been found guilty in the same circumstance. And not of manslaughter, but of dangerous driving causing death. So, I think
there is actually an example of that.
Then is it just another spark to the general the general tinderbox, so to speak, of Aboriginal Australian relations? It's not in itself an example of unjust treatment of this young Aboriginal boy. Is that the view from the audience? I feel like that guy on Q&A, what's his name? Gosh, okay, never mind. No, and really, I tend to agree with that too, actually, because it's. I don't really see this as an example of unjust sentencing, to be honest.
Yeah,
on the excess, as in too generous to the accused, to the offender.
Yeah. So I was actually going to say there's a really good example of two white kids that died in Macquarie Fields, right? And similar, no, it was the cops chasing them though this time
that's
instead.
right. Yeah,
Of,
he got hit by a cop car, didn't he?
yeah,
Yep.
cops weren't charged. It was a standard chase.
Mm.
There were a bunch of riots that occurred, and well, that's all that ever happened of it. They said, "Hey, look, they stole a car. Right, the cops are going to chase them." Right.
Mm. It's true.
And then
There's something to that as well, because I mean it depends whether the cops chased them at a safe distance. Did they do that? Question mark.
I really hate that question right now. I'm sitting there going like, I want to. The reality is, I want to give as wide a berth as possible for people to try and recover their property, but without like resorting to, hey, go out there and kill the fucker, right? Like,
I actually
that's
had that from a libertarian this week who basically said that I asked him point blank, if I steal your wallet, can you blow my brains out right there on the spot? And he said yes. That essentially you have unlimited capacity to get back your property, and it's like that's not consistent with libertarian principles at all. Like that's just insane.
It's not proportionate.
I was a member of that exact same discussion, and I remember saying, I think you've misunderstood what a castle doctrine is.
Yeah.
Right? Castle doctrine is you are a king in your own castle, not you are a king of every fucking castle.
Yeah.
Right? That's a tyrant, and that's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, it's whether it's in. No, let's just move on.
Especially since I started talking about being kings and castles.
Yeah. Oh yes. Well, that's. See, this is why you're normally the host, because you've got the best segue. So let's talk about republicanism. It's come up again. Bill Shorten, the federal opposition leader, or the Federal Labor Party, has put it on their platform that they want to, if they win the next election, they'll bring forward a vote for an Australian republic. The question being just a straight yes or no. Do you want an Australian head of state?
Well, it's a plebiscite. Right. The first one. So this is hilarious to me for so many reasons. Firstly, support for a republic, and I say this as a Republican, is at an all-time low. Yep. Right. And then my next favorite thing about this topic is, hang on, I thought you said plebiscites were bad because they're not binding. Why are you pushing for a plebiscite on whether to have the republic or not? So I'm sitting there going like, this is going to be an interesting duality, where you've got, the Labor Party going, plebiscite on gay marriage, bad. Plebiscite on republicanism, good. I feel like I'm watching Animal Farm in real life.
Okay. I know you're sort of being a bit flippant, but to be fair to those people who oppose a plebiscite, and I think on this show I said I'm in favour of anything that brings about change, and I still
that was both of us.
Yeah, I think we sort of generally speaking, plebiscite is okay. Just a parliamentary vote would be better, but a plebiscite's okay. But I think the argument against a plebiscite is that it's going to unleash all this hatred against gay people. I suspect people are less concerned with a wave of hatred against the Windsors. I mean, they're a pretty contemptible lot to begin with.
Good Lord.
So, also they're white rich people. And generally speaking, if you're going to put marginalized gay people and white rich people on the same kind of level, you might be sort of misunderstanding the point.
What about all the monarchists, man? What about all the monarchists? They're going to face so much hate. They're going to be like, why?
Another bunch of white rich people.
No, but actually, so I don't know if I've said this before. Like, the reason why I'm a Republican is because Republicanism is about
because you're a filthy communist.
No, but it's yeah. But the point is, like, Republicanism is about faith in your fellow man, right? Like, so every monarchist I've ever met has a Hobbesian view of the world. Mankind is too, and I'm sorry if I triggered you and you're a transgender person, but I'm using alliteration here. The point is, mankind is, too stupid, too evil, too, lazy to really do anything. So you need betters with stability to sort of manage that kind of stuff. And every monarchist kind of has that sort of view at heart. That, like, you hear them when they talk about the crown. The crown is stability. The crown is, this benign dictatorship that sits there and makes sure that no one gets too far, too much control in their hands. And I kind of sit there and go like, yeah, but to me, that just means you've put too much power into government. Like, I would just say, keep it small and,
Can I offer a counterpoint, Vikas, to that argument?
Yeah.
My position, in as much as I have one on this debate, and frankly, I almost am tempted not to have one, but my position is that this entire debate over the monarchy is meaningless because the monarchy does nothing in this country. I don't regard the monarchy as relevant in the least. They appear on our coinage and our stamps. I don't care about that. I think it would be a waste of money to change things. I don't think that changing things will result in a better system. And I don't see the monarchy as relevant to Australian life at all. I have a simple, pragmatic perspective. It's a waste of money. That's it. It's a financial question for me, nothing more.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in that camp. And to be perfectly honest, that's a rational view to hold. But the interesting thing is, if you take a look at what the Australian Republican movement... So I say that while I'm a Republican, I'm not a member of the ARM, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I left them a while ago. They are a bunch of knobs. And if anyone from the ARM listens, you are a bunch of knobs. You are a bunch of knobs that want to undo the 1975 dismissal of Whitlam, and that is your sole purpose in life. You want to reconstruct our constitution so that the precedent set there is undone. That is your whole purpose. Please,
the
let's be less.
movement is just as filled with knobs as well. So it's a
No. But no. Listen, this needs to be
legal. I think it's
Australians for a constitutional monarchy. Okay, but like the point is, the Australian Republican movement. Okay, and this needs to be said and repeated over and over again because it's there in all of their, in all of their statements. A huge chunk of what they want the president to do, right, is basically not be able to sack the prime minister, right? There was an entire paragraph on how the president cannot sack the prime minister, right? I'm not even kidding. It was ridiculous, right? I sat there and went like, hang on, your entire movement. And you can hear this. They're like, all we want to do is change it so that it's a president, right, instead of the governor general. Okay,
we need to backtrack for a minute and mention that Gough Whitlam was sacked by the governor general of the day. Gough Whitlam, prime minister, back in the 1970s, was sacked by the governor general of the day, John Kerr, because
for not being able to guarantee supply.
But basically he couldn't finance his own government. He couldn't pay the bills. So the Governor-General sacked him, resulted in a new election. Gough Whitlam of the ALP lost the election, the Liberals won, and as a result, the ALP have been very, very upset by the dismissal ever since, which means that the left-wing Australian Republican movement is going on the back of that sentiment, has inserted these clauses into its proposal that the President cannot sack the Prime Minister of the day, whereas the Governor General did. Anyway, go on, Lee.
Okay. No. You've actually pointed out the entire thing. Yeah, that's literally the entire movement. The entire movement is built around that one event.
As the only non-Hobbesian monarchist that Vickers didn't even realise he knew, I'll defend the monarchy purely from an institutional point of view. So I have no particular love for Windsors. I think that kings and queens are just as full of shit as every other form of the state.
Agreed.
Right, you are a Hobbesian.
I think the main thing for me, so the reason why I support the status quo, is that essentially we've spent 800 years trying to defang the king or the queen. So, going back to Magna Carta, we've had this long process of trying to restrain absolute power, and for the longest time, Parliament was that restraint. Like the response to absolute monarchy was, let's have a Parliament voted by the people to then restrain the monarch, to restrain their ability to do everything, and separation of powers and all this other kind of stuff. So the whole tradition is of restraint of power. And, having executed a couple of them and having had some rebellions and all sorts of, John Locke and all the rest of it, we've finally got to the point where we've successfully defanged the monarchy. And when we reach the point of complete victory, where we have them completely tamed, where we have them completely under our thumb, in the sense that even if Charles, in his weedy, obnoxious wisdom, thought that he could actually rise above his place and say something about the nature of politics, or try to somehow influence
he would be
the
ignored,
politics,
yes.
He would be slapped down so hard by every single person around him, he wouldn't ever bother to do it again. And if he continued to persist on it, people would get rid of him. So the thing that I love about the status quo is that people think that essentially any involvement by the British monarch in political affairs is illegitimate and they can't do it and they won't stand for it. Now, if you get rid of that, if you get rid of it, what you're going to replace them with is somebody who's been endowed with this virtue of being of the people, chosen by the people. And that essentially...
So messiahs.
Essentially it's trading somebody who we think has no legitimate ability to get involved in politics to somebody who has complete legitimate to interfere in anything they like because they're chosen by the people. And that's what we see in the US
agree with
presidency, where
Lee
you
about
essentially have a priest of the the high priest of the religion of government, where they're endowed by God. So it's essentially it's divine right all over again, and that's a problem in Parliament.
It's divine right through democracy.
Yes, that's it. And Parliament has that problem at the moment. I mean, that's why even though from a historical perspective, Parliament is a good thing. From a current perspective, I think Parliament is a problem because essentially it's taken that divine right of kings and applied it to itself. As like you said, divine right.
Yeah,
of democracy.
people see parliamentarians and the Prime Minister the same way they see the President overseas. Let's be frank, we have a cult of state.
Yeah.
It's called our Parliament. Overseas, it's Donald Trump and the President and the Congress and all of them. They're the cult. Over here, it's us. I mean, I don't know, Lee, whether this changeover to an elected president will really, or appointed president, we don't know, will really change that in itself too much. I see what you're getting at, but I don't know.
At least you have one less person who's involved in that, though. Like at the moment, you've got a separation of powers where you've got this Governor General and this Queen who can't really do anything, but they do have some part to play in in the operation of the system, and they've got a range of things that they can't do that theoretically they could do, but they just can't do it as a matter of pragmatism. So only in a genuine crisis can the Governor General stick his finger on the scales or her finger on the scales and affect the outcome. And that's okay. Like, I'm okay with the reserve powers. But now, essentially, if you have an elected president, you're essentially reinstituting that divine right of democracy back into that role.
That's true. You're giving more legitimacy to that person.
Yeah, to do stuff.
More
I don't want them
popular
doing anything. I want them to
legitimacy.
sit on their ass and drink cups of tea and cut ribbons and read books to children and be peasant people who people respect because they do shit all.
I can respect that because who really cares who the Governor General is? What authority does he have? Zero, none. And that's a good thing. Yeah.
So you can have the final word and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, yeah. So, see, if I was going with the Republic, I would actually go in the opposite direction, and I'd be going like, Parliament has a little bit too much power. Let's decentralize that out some more, and just keep going down, right? Like, just keep decentralizing it down. But unfortunately, but that's like you said. I'm a Republican in the sense that I believe in government around the people. Yeah. Right, like done by people for themselves. Yep. Right. Not for other people, and that's unfortunately not what all Republicans believe, which makes me a minority of one, I guess, in any Republican sphere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
all right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. We've got a little bit over time, but yes, next week I think we might be tackling euthanasia. We were going to talk about it today, but then this Republican fever overswept us. And we talked about that instead. So I think next week we're going to talk about euthanasia and whatever else is going on during the week. So make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube or subscribe to us on iTunes. And feel free to share and like and subscribe and all the rest of it. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah.